welcome everybody. We're so excited that you're joining us. You know, infrastructure is one of the most common topics that we're asked about as governors. When will the new bridge be built? When will the potholes be fixed? When will my community get high-speed internet? Why is it taking so long to finish? You know, just take your pick, the pipeline, the grid upgrade, solar projects, you name it. There's no sugarcoating it. The United States is among the slowest nations in the developed world approving and completing infrastructure projects, particularly, you know, when it comes to energy. You know, permitting reviews for energy projects in the U.S. take, listen to this, 6 years longer than in China, India, or other European Union nations. That's according to the analysis from BCG. So I've had energy stakeholders in Oklahoma tell me that it could take up to 10 years to fully permit a pipeline project. It takes about 6 months to build them. You know, the process gets drawn out due to agency overlaps from the federal government. There's so many ants on that ant pile, bureaucracy, as well as litigation. There's one company that was sharing with me, I'll leave their name out, but this is a existing pipeline that is trying to retrofit for carbon sequestration. And it's going to take 10 years to get that new project approved. This really makes no sense. And that's why governors are working together across party lines and state lines on common sense solutions to try to speed up the process to deliver energy and infrastructure benefits nationwide for all Americans. You know, in Oklahoma, we're working with our neighbors. I've signed an MOU with the governor of Louisiana and also with Arkansas on a hydrogen hub. This is a really cool project. It's a public-private partnership that will lead to development and deployment of a hydrogen network. And Oklahoma's energy story is an all-of-the-above energy story. And Oklahoma is like number 3 in natural gas production. We're so proud of our oil and gas industry, number 5 in oil production. We're also number 2 in wind energy production, one of only 4 states that over 45% of our energy comes from renewables. So we believe that you need an all-of-the-above approach to really have an affordable, reliable energy grid. And, you know, to prioritize the importance of project delivery for projects like these hydrogen hubs, the governors here in the NGA, we've created an energy and infrastructure working group in February of 2023 that focused on solutions to streamline the permitting process to address legal challenges and tackle procurement issues. Both Congress and the Biden administration recognize the urgency of the problem. And governors welcome their actions to include we had several meaningful permitting reform in the recent debt ceiling legislation. So those reforms are a great start, but we believe much more is needed, including judicial review. So that's some of the things we're going to talk about today. We've got a great panel with you. And we need to speed up the delivery of energy and infrastructure projects all across all of our states. And so now I want to turn it over to Governor Cooper from the great state of North Carolina to give you his thoughts and his perspective. So Governor Cooper.
Thank you, Governor Stitt, and thank you for your work in the state of Oklahoma. We have an amazing panel here to talk about infrastructure today. Brag on my own state a little bit. We are the 3rd fastest growing state in the country. For the 2nd year in a row, we've just been named the top state for business by MSNBC. And when you look at their rankings and why they choose what they choose as to what's good for business, number 1, obviously, is a workforce. But number 2 is infrastructure. We have a well-trained, dedicated, diverse workforce, but we know how important infrastructure is not only to businesses, but to everyday families as well. Right now, we have a generational opportunity to invest in infrastructure across this country. We've had plans before about things that we needed to do to connect every house and business to high-speed internet, to fix our roads and bridges, expand our ports and airports. Now we actually have the funding to do it. So what we're going to be talking about here is how to do it. The first thing that my entire administration knows is that we're first going to compete for every federal dollar. And when you do that, I think it's important to bring in everybody. Much like President Biden, who appointed Mayor Landrieu to try to coordinate things, I have appointed a pandemic recovery director who is helping to coordinate our applications for federal funding. And we are working closely with local governments, community colleges, universities, private businesses, regulators, and our federal partners. And already we've seen some significant success, as have many of the states across the country. We know that high-speed internet is a critical part of infrastructure. And we had already started this process, but we were doing it with state money, but we had a process going. And so as soon as we got American Rescue Plan funding, we started using that money, about $1 billion, to begin the process. And now we're going to get $1.5 billion from the BEAD money, which will help us truly connect all families and businesses to high-speed internet. We also know that connecting people is not just the fiber, but it's also being able to afford it. It's why I set up the first in the country Office of Digital Equity and Literacy. And I know many of you all are working to try to get more families signed up for the Affordable Connectivity Program, the ACP. We have almost 900,000 North Carolina families that are on it, gives them $30 a month. We've also competed for money for offshore wind and the grid improvement program. We've gone in with Duke Energy because we know if we're going to build offshore wind off the coast of North Carolina, we got to have the grid to get the electricity back in. With bridges and with charging infrastructure, with the Inflation Reduction Act, there's so many opportunities. And water and wastewater, we're already distributing hundreds of millions of dollars to help our small towns and our businesses connect with water and wastewater. We do have permitting issues and challenges. There is a way to do all of this to protect our air and water and to make sure that permits move faster. One thing we're doing in North Carolina is I've appointed liaisons between our Department of Environmental Quality and all of the new companies that are coming into North Carolina to make sure that everybody knows what to do. And it's important to make sure that we work together to get this done. We've got three super panelists here today, and first we've got Calvin Butler, who's the president and CEO of Exelon. We have Scott Woerner, who is the president of National Grid of New England, and obviously they're working on offshore wind. And we have Tony Lewis, who is the regional vice president of state public policy and government affairs for Verizon with some North Carolina ties. But Calvin, we're gonna start it off with you, if you will.
Thank you, Governor Cooper, and good afternoon, everyone. And let me just begin by saying thank you to the governors for bringing this important topic to the forefront. I think the fact that you guys have put this special committee together to talk about this issue goes to show you the change that our industry is undertaking right now. When you talk about the transformation of the energy industry and the infrastructure needs of our country, think in terms of the energy industry that we will undergo more change in the next 10 years than we have in the last 100. I say that, as you guys have both said, it's very exciting. It's not only exciting for the communities that we serve, it's exciting for Exelon's 19,000 employees. It's exciting for the 10 million customers that we have the privilege of serving in the great state of New Jersey through Atlantic City Electric. And I just need to say Tyler Anthony and his team are here today. Our customers in Delaware, our customers in Maryland, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Chicago, and the District of Columbia. Why are those jurisdictions important, and why did I mention them? I mention them because Exelon is unique in the sense that we serve some of the most diverse metropolitan cities in the country, but we also serve coastal areas in Maryland and New Jersey. We also serve rural areas where farmland is locked in, and they have the same challenges of infrastructure needs, but how you address them are very different. Governor Stitt talked about that portfolio approach to addressing this. And as Exelon, we have to take that same approach, where we have the privilege of being a combination gas and electric utility, meaning that the gas business represents 12% of our portfolio. And we do believe it's important for reliability and resiliency of the grid that it must be an all of the above approach. And why else is that important? That's also important for the affordability factor. Because my biggest job as a CEO through this transformation is ensuring that this transition is an equitable one for all of our communities that we serve. Because the belief is that if you leave any of your customers behind in this transition, the transition will not be complete. So having said that, it also goes to what are the challenges. So the challenges to that permitting question, getting something done. When you were talking, I almost said amen, because I can relate to it, right? So the challenge becomes our ambitions as a country through IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the $1.2 trillion that has been set aside to go into infrastructure build out. How quickly can we get that within these jurisdictions and make a difference? But what's happening is the ambition is there, but our actions are counterintuitive. We're still operating off of 20, 30, 40-year-old rules for today's problems. So therefore, even looking at our own states, our own jurisdictions, what we find, and I share this with you because it's important. As governors, you've all put very aggressive economic development goals. You have a committee within the NGA around economic development. You're setting policy. But then when we go as your host utility to implement those rules or implement those goals, there's a conflict. So the need for us to continue to partner, to collaborate, break down silos in this process is critical to get this money to work and to build up our communities. And the last piece I'll say, it goes right to what you were just saying, Governor Cooper, the workforce. This transformation cannot be done without a qualified workforce. So therefore, the workforce development programs, the infrastructure academies that are being set up across the country have to be critical and must be critical to ensure that we have a talented workforce to move forward. And I think why also that's important because the communities then feel as if you're doing it with them instead of to them. Because when you go into a transmission siting conversation, when you go to lay a pipeline conversation, if I'm a community member, the question that I get is, where do I see myself in that? Yes, you're talking about laying fiber. Yes, you're talking about laying for reliability and resilience, but no one who lives in our community is working on that pipeline. No one is laying that fiber. So again, it must be an equitable transition to get this done. So again, thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to any questions.
Steve Woerner here, and thank you again for the opportunity. Great remarks, Calvin. I agree completely with everything you said. I truly appreciate the governors and NGA pulling this together. This should be a thoughtful discussion, a very timely time in our industry, because we are truly at an inflection point. As you said, Calvin, the work we're going to do over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years is going to far surpass the work we've done in the past 100. Far surpass. At National Grid, we're committed to delivering a fair, clean, and affordable energy transition for all customers and communities. And to do that, we know we need to be smarter and building a smarter, stronger, and cleaner energy system. So I'm going to highlight 3 things that are very consistent with the remarks you heard from my colleague Calvin here. We need to be grounded in what needs to be accomplished, what needs to be built. We need to be clear how we're going to work together, public and private partnership, to accomplish that. And we need to address a significant barrier to getting projects done, which is the permitting processes that we follow in the industry. To give you a feel for the size and scale, just using some examples, in New England and New York, we serve 7 million customers with both power and heat. And those are homes and businesses. And that means hundreds of towns and cities, right? Across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I serve 2/3 of those 350 some odd towns that we have. It's a beautiful part of the U.S., as you all know. But delivering that energy, we're doing in a world where we're experiencing more extreme weather events, where there's it requires us to take actions to build a more resilient system. And we're trying to drive down greenhouse gas emissions at the same time, convert customers and bring more loads onto our electric networks. There's monumental volumes of clean energy systems that need to be built. To meet the goals of the region, we need to build an electric grid that's 2 to 3 times bigger than today's. For New England alone, that means ballpark of 15 or more transmission lines to connect offshore wind to bring more power to serve the region, which we expect that load to at least double, right? And if not triple. And that shift that's going to occur between what's a summer peaking region over to a winter peaking region with regard to electric demand. We need to install thousands of miles of new and upgraded distribution lines, hundreds of new and upgraded substations, and more robust secure communication network that will enable us to more efficiently identify issues and expand the system where necessary and avoid unnecessary disruptions to the economy. The good news is that our region understands this need and the challenge very well. In Massachusetts, we, along with the other utilities in the state, will be submitting what's called an electric sector modernization plan that will detail the investments that are required to be made over the next 5, 10, and 25 years to meet the Commonwealth's goals. In New York, in support of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, we've identified the need for transmission upgrades to 1,000 miles of our network. At any given moment, we have 150 large-scale projects underway and a growing queue of another 150. And all these projects require engagement with the host communities, as Calvin talked about, and the agencies to secure the necessary rights-of-way to accomplish this work. Another example is the collaboration work we're doing in New York was an effort to support broadband that's being delivered to areas of the state that previously did not have it. This is a massive investment and a collaboration amongst public and private partnerships agencies in upstate New York. And more broadly, our states are working together to advance proposals to the Department of Energy to help offset the cost of and accelerate the investments in this new infrastructure. Some examples would be our Twin States Clean Power Link, our repowering of the Braden Point area for bringing in offshore wind. Both of these will connect and create opportunities for offshore wind and other renewable sources to increase our energy supplies and help lower energy costs on the commodity side. There's also the Northeast Hydrogen Hub, which involves 7 states, and it recognizes the need to look for more advanced decarbonized fuels to leverage the networks that exist today. What projects and initiatives like these that I mentioned have in common is that this work is being done collaboratively with public and private sector partners, multiple stakeholders and communities that are all coming together to get this work done. As we move from creating this bold ambition into this execution phase where we're actually getting these projects built, we recognize that there are challenges around getting projects sited, built, challenges around the cost, securing the necessary supply chain, securing the necessary people, workforce, and acquiring property rights, just to name a few of the challenges. Foundationally, we have challenges, I think there's a lot of agreement here. We have challenges around agreeing on what it means to make an orderly transition to a cleaner, more affordable, and more just energy future. But if we work together, those decisions will be much easier. For example, we know we need to make decisions around changing the way we site and permit larger infrastructure projects. We have to move from a series of sequential approvals from multiple agencies to a process that is more streamlined, transparent, and accessible to all. Thanks to the NGA and the governors that have participated in the working group, as their recommendation on this challenge was absolutely spot on. And we're pleased that in New York and Massachusetts, both are actively working to address these challenges. For example, Governor Haley and her administration in Massachusetts have launched a task force to identify policy gaps and improvements that will accelerate the process while not compromising community involvement. The Massachusetts legislature also has advanced bills to do the same. And the good news is there's a resounding agreement across the board of what needs to be done and a willingness to work together. We know that no single technology, no single project is going to meet all of our needs. It's going to take all of us working together to make the hard decisions about where we need to make investments in this orderly transition to a cleaner, more secure, more resilient energy future that works for all of our customers and communities and propels us all in our respective jurisdictions to new heights. Tony?
Thank you. And thank you to my fellow panelists. Well said. I will try not to repeat. However, I want to say a thank you to all the governors here today. And Governor, thank you so much for the opportunity. You set the tone with one word: generational opportunity. So I think I'll use my time to be tactical, if I may, to talk about some things that we should be doing right now to ensure that that generational change happens now. So a couple of facts. $65 billion is available for broadband. 42.5 billion of that is to build network for those unserved and underserved. Let's make sure we're clear on that opportunity, and you were, by saying you're going after every dollar. Absolutely the right thing to do. So this B program, largest investment in broadband ever in these United States, ever. So it was set up as a shared responsibility. And the opportunity for us to be here with you today is a demonstration that we all understand that it is a shared opportunity to take advantage of this. 5-year plans need to be built. Every state involved in that. Those plans could be dense, but they don't have to be. We believe they can be simplified. So at the end of June, we all saw what the Commerce Department did, right? Using the FCC's broadband maps, they allocated all these dollars. And it goes from 100 million in our nation's capital to 3.3 billion in Texas. So we have a map across our states. And now we've got 6 months to complete those plans. It can be done. I would tell you, don't take the whole 6 months, right? Some of you are already active, but right now, those plans should be in place and ready to go, I would suggest, by the summer. The faster you get those plans in place, the faster the allocation of funding will come to your states. So what should the plans look like? Very tactical, very clear. One, think about this. Selecting experienced and strong labor standard companies will benefit you. This is generational, so it's critical that we rely on what we know works. And we know the types of companies and workers that will work in order to not only build this network, but maintain it for the generations that we're talking about. I'm glad you mentioned ACP. Use it. It's a marvelous program. It needs to be reauthorized, but use it, right? It's there. There are almost 20 million people already involved in that. It satisfies the requirements of the plan. I say again, satisfies the requirements. So let's use that. It's critical that all of us push for that funding. And the last point I'll make, you've heard already, streamlining permitting. Absolutely essential to get these networks built. So, in simple terms, Verizon, we build the networks that move the world forward, right? Right now, we've got people around the country in every one of your states, underground, on wireless towers, in network operation centers, caring for those emergencies that we know that we've seen this week and last month and last year will require the kind of networks that can sustain the environment that we're in today. I'm personally happy to report, and I see some of my good friends out there, that we already have partnerships with states, with federal programs. In New York, Governor Hochul, in Pennsylvania, in Delaware, Governor Carney, we've worked together many years ago on broadband. Proud to hear that. In Maryland and Virginia, we're active. We've got thousands of locations already being built. But what matters most is that one person that finally gets broadband in Snow Hill, North Carolina. That's what makes it. So we've got an opportunity to get this done. But I want to give you one quick example of how it already works. And I don't think Governor Shapiro is here, but if you noted what happened with the tragedy at I-95 and the collapse of that infrastructure that impacted every part of this country, he said a few things in his remarks. He talked about speed, innovation, a simple, quick path. He said experienced workers mattered. He said all hands on deck. He said not a single moment wasted. And he said this is good government in action. We can take that example recently and apply it to what we're talking about right now, which is building great broadband for those people who need it most. Thank you, Governor.
Well, Tony, let me just say, with your Verizon, you have a generational plan in place, because even successful adult children never leave your cell phone plan. Never. They never do. So you guys have got it made. I know you all have that problem. All of you have that problem. Governor Stitt.
Well, hey, thanks so much, Tony. Thanks for the panelists. We're going to open it up now to some Q&As from our governors, and wanted to start with great governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, who also co-chairs this energy and infrastructure working group. So, Governor Cox.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin, and thanks to the panel. Governor Cooper, thank you. We do all agree, this is a bipartisan issue, right? The permitting reform is so important. Kevin, thank you for your leadership as we've worked with the White House on this issue now for a long time. I'd love for us as governors to take a little credit for some of the permitting reform that was done. I know that weighing in, I think, was helpful, and there's certainly more to do. I specifically just want to bring up and ask some of you to weigh in, if you would, on the importance of litigation reform in this area. I mean, we got some of the low-hanging fruit, right? We are going to get some sequential decision-making, some shot clocks put in place to do that more quickly. But the endless litigation that happens, a lot of what takes so long for these projects to move forward is just litigation. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on getting that reform piece done.
Yeah. So Governor, thank you. I agree. And you take some of these regional transmission organizations, our utilities all sit within the PJM jurisdiction. And directly to your point, if a project of someone is not chosen, the first step they're going to do is to litigate. So then as the process unfolds, it goes through that, it continues to move on. And every step along the way, next thing you know, you're 5 to 6 years out. And mind you, if the project is being litigated, the company that is suing does not even have to have all the checks and balances of a workable project. They're just bringing litigation based on them not being chosen, and therefore unpeeling. Because one of the things that is important as a transmission owner through this process is that there's some proprietary information that is protected. And the litigation process is often used to reveal information that otherwise they wouldn't have access to. So you're absolutely correct. I know PJM and the leadership is looking at what reform they need to happen, but to your point, it's not moving quick enough.
And I'll just add, from a broadband perspective, with the opportunity for these state plans and what can be done to them in the process of litigation, it can slow this to a crawl if we are not cautious. If we work together, if we are true partners, there are always solutions. But taking the first solution as litigation cannot be the way we move forward to ensure that the people who need this most get it. So I agree with you, Governor.
But and I just want to add on NEPA reform and litigation reform. I mean, a lot of the broadband, especially in the Western United States, is going across public lands, and so that NEPA reform is really important.
Absolutely.
We'll never get broadband to the places that need it the most. We've already hit the places that are easy.
So I think Governor Healy of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts had a question.
Thank you. And thank you to my fellow governors for all the work done on the working group around this really important issue. I sit in the Far East, and I know that energy and our future is something that, you know, we are all commonly aligned on trying to figure out with our partners in private industry. And so I'm new to this, but I benefit from the work already done this year, looking at permitting and other reforms. I wanted to just raise something with respect to sort of community and community engagement. I mean, building out these projects, whether it's for a more flexible, you know, accommodating electric grid or anything related to additional clean energy construction, requires that community buy-in. And just referencing Tony, lawsuits and litigation, none of us want to see time wasted on that or money spent on that. But do you have an approach, the three entities, do you have an approach about how you engage and how you think about building out equitably, you know, as we move forward? And then, you know, the other question is related to as you, you know, whether in preparing applications, getting ready for construction, upgrades, new transmission lines. I mean, how do you think, and how can we think about community engagement and good community engagement and buy-in that will help move things along, and remove, you know, and take out some of the friction in all of this?
I'm happy to start with that one. Governor Healy, thank you for your leadership on this and so many other matters, and your partnership as we build the energy infrastructure in Massachusetts. You and your team have been absolutely clear that we need to build towards this clean energy economy, and we're committed to doing that. Getting to your specific question, when we think about what projects need to be built, we also think about the community where it needs to be built, and we firmly believe that those who host infrastructure should benefit from that. That's simply stated, but let me give you some examples. When you think about the Twin States project that I mentioned earlier, we just submitted it for DOE funding through the IIJA program. You and Governor Sununu are very familiar with this project, but for other people's benefits, it's a 1,200 megawatt bidirectional high voltage direct current line down from Quebec. It will act as a stabilizing resource as we bring additional renewable sources onto the grid in New England. That 170-mile long transmission line leverages existing right-of-ways, which makes it much simpler to site. And through our partnership with Clean Energy, what we did is we went through the dozens and dozens of communities that are around that and spoke with each of those communities about the project and what might benefit those communities as we come through there. And as a result, we have tremendous support from those communities and the governors and the legislatures in all the jurisdictions that are involved. Together, more than 200 public officials, dozens of towns and community groups, environmental and labor organizations are all coming out in support of the project, which we haven't even secured DOE funding for yet. But that's an example of an approach that we need to take on all of our large infrastructure builds. It has to be community by community, street by street. And I believe that we were successful in this project because we started really early with that approach, truly believing that those who host infrastructure should benefit from it. And I'll leave it right there. We talked to the communities, we talked to project abutters, we explained what the project was, what the benefits were, and we put together a community benefits package that works for that community, and it was designed with input from that community.
And Governor Healy, I would just add, I agree with everything Steve said about engaging the community early and often, but I would even take it a step further, is as a utility, pure transmission and distribution utility, we had to take a look about how we even came in for rate cases, because we were always coming in after the fact on an annual basis to invest capital and so forth. At Exelon, we made a decision across most of our jurisdictions that we were going to do multi-year plans. And for those of you who don't know what multi-year plans is, we put together a capital investment plan, a grid plan, to invest over the next 3 to 4 years. And why was that important? Because the stakeholder process in developing that investment plan engaged all the community. Whether you were large industrial, small businesses, residential, we laid out to the commission in a very collaborative nature, this is our strategy for investing in the communities. And as a result, people started saying, why are you doing that? Asking the questions. And through a process, we were answering it. And now the commission, in that 10-month process or 7th-month process, whatever it was, went through their hearing, still went through a litigated process, litigation not in terms of law, but just everyone having an input. And now when it's done, you have an investment plan for the community for the next 3 to 4 years. That process alone engaged the community. And to Steve's point, we also approached it from a vantage point of economic development and job creation. This is what it did. And so therefore, when you pass legislation on whether it's transportation electrification, decarbonization, whatever those fiber network, whatever it was, we were then able to associate this investment creates this result. And as a result of that, you hold us accountable as your utility to do what we say we're going to do. And if we don't, you hold us accountable for that. And we took that in partnership with our regulatory bodies, and it's made a huge difference. Now, we're still going through the process. Now we get to run our business and do what we do best. Invest in infrastructure, collect on it, and bring it back. So I think that's also a key driver there.
And I'll just add, Governor, I'm so glad you brought up local engagement in communities. Verizon's a global company with a local heart. We have the benefit of having over 100,000 people in neighborhoods. They're in the churches, they're in your grocery stores, they're at the civic centers, they're part of the fabric of the communities. We use them to ensure that as we reach out to communities, that we're reaching the right organizations. As I said earlier, it's all about partnerships. We're able to do what we're able to do because we rely on everyone understanding what we're doing, not leaving anyone behind, listening to concerns, and finding a collective solution. You do that when you engage. And so I'm happy to tell you that we have departments that focus on local engagement. And not that we set up an employee group to do that, but they reach out to our communities. So the NYCHA housing projects in New York City, we were out there with those residents, ensuring that they understand why network is being built and how it can benefit them. The Boys and Girls Clubs of America, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, all these organizations around the country, we tap into because they know what's happening in those local communities. Some of them are our employees, some of them are friends and family, but we want to use them to better engage our communities every step of the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the questions. I think we've got next one from Governor of Puerto Rico, Luisi.
Yes, as you probably know, in Puerto Rico, we're in the midst of an unprecedented reconstruction effort because of damage caused by Hurricane Maria. This was back in 2017. Mm-hmm. Right now, we have over 5,000 permanent construction projects underway. But the more critical ones relate to the energy system, which still is too fragile. And so just in this sector, we have in excess of $11 billion of FEMA funding to rebuild our grid, to improve it, because at the same time, we're moving away from burning oil to generate our energy, moving to renewables, the sooner the better. So it's a complex effort. So Secretary Granholm and I were concerned about having duplicative regulatory processes going on. And so what I ended up doing was issuing an executive order in the context of this emergency infrastructure of Puerto Rico. In that context, I basically issued a directive Puerto Rico to give reciprocity to HP reviews by FEMA, environmental historical preservation reviews by FEMA, EPA reviews, Corps of Engineer, permits. I'm just giving a list. Fish and Wildlife reviews and approvals. Basically, I'm telling them, if the federal authority act first, stay your hand and just rely on those for permitting purposes. So I did that, and probably it's a creative way to expedite these major projects that are on their way. Having said that, my question to you, as you know, coming from the private sector, is what can we do as governors to facilitate, expedite major infrastructure projects? It could be in the broadband, telecommunications area, it could be energy, it could be highway. Is there anything we can do to expedite these projects, reduce the cost of these projects? That's the question I have for you.
So, I mean, I'll start. I do think you should hold us accountable to make sure we're getting the input from the communities, right? And that the projects have considered those benefits, but then work with us to say, okay, not everybody's going to be happy, but we have to make a decision, and then partner with us and show that leadership that's necessary to move these projects forward.
Yeah, that's right. I think, Governor, that part of the problem that we all encounter as we're trying to partner is the forces of uncertainty. And we have got to find ways to step one, and then step two, and then step three, and onward. So often we see the big problem and wring our hands and say, well, we're going to have to do these 50 things, when there's always a first step. And so I would encourage us to always look for that first opportunity, and that first opportunity could create the momentum, the flywheel, if I may, that's necessary to start to move the project forward. Now, I say that recognizing that's a much harder step than I'm articulating. I know that. But for me, once you get started, once people see that you are dedicated together to this end, then you have an opportunity there.
Governor, Puerto Rico is a wonderful example of how our industry came together to support and assist. And, we talk about the energy industry, but when you were in a need, everybody got together and we rolled in. And it's just an amazing example. So the next stage, as you said, is the rebuild. I would give you two things that I think would go a long way. Establish very clear expectations of what you want. Be crystal clear about what you're looking for from organizations that are going to come and invest and build. And then two, put a timeline around it. It's amazing what happens when you are very clear and you provide a timeline, how the engineering and the creativity gets to get it done. I think those are the two biggest opportunities we have, and then those companies who are able to step up to that challenge will.
Thank you so much.
I'll tell you, folks, this time has passed quickly, but we are deeply grateful to Calvin, Steve, and Tony for their input and the work their companies are doing. Governor Stitt, I appreciated helping you to lead this panel discussion. As we meet this challenge of infrastructure, there may not be a group more important in this country than the nation's governors right now, because we have the opportunity to bring in the local governments, the private businesses, the federal government, and the regulators to get this done. We have an unprecedented opportunity here, and it's going to be up to us to make sure that it gets done efficiently and effectively and as quickly as possible. I look forward to working with each of you to make sure that that happens in this great country. And thank you guys very much for this.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.